What is realism? In international relations, realism is a theory that focuses on aspects of competition and conflict. It presumes that the state is the main actor, and the other actors, such as individuals and organizations, have limited power. For this theory, the state is a unitary actor. This means that national interests, especially in times of war, leads the state to act and speak with only one voice. The decision-making actors are rational. This means that rational decisions will be made within goals of national interest. Thus, making decisions that would make the state weak or vulnerable would not be rational. The theory suggests that all leaders recognize this in its attempts to survive inside a competitive environment between states. The states live in a context of anarchy. This means there is nothing above the states to control them. Inside the states, we have police forces and military forces, for example. At an emergency, we would expect that those institutions would act. Outside the states, internationally, there is no clear expectation of somebody or something that could act, since there is no clear hierarchy established. Therefore, the states can only count with themselves. The lack of authority to establish rules makes it a self-help system. Each state is responsible for its own survival and free to define their own interests and search for power. Anarchy, however, leads to a situation in which power has a strong role in the formation of interstate relations. Realism presents an idea that is opposite to liberalism. Human nature is perceived as something that will always seek for violence. That is why the contract is so important for people like Hobbes. In this theory, there is the idea that individual freedom generates instability in the community. Therefore, the state is necessary. The state has two main roles from the point of view of security. It defends individual freedom by defending the life of the individual. Also, the state defends the community against the outsider. In this way, the state has a role in both internal and external security. If we accept the fact that the state needs to fulfill this role, then international law couldn't be applied, since it advocates limiting the state from fulfilling its defense role. It is not possible to count on other nations to guarantee your interest. Thus, it is necessary to use the prerogative to go to war. For the realist, this reflection has 2 points. First, the freedom of the individual cannot be seen as the ultimate foundation for the stability of that society. This freedom, due to the selfish nature of man, creates instability. Therefore, we need a state. And second, the realist refuses to think of the individual as if everyone were the same and wanted the same things. For him, what gives meaning to the individual's life is his experience within the community. He needs culture in a nation. His life has no meaning in itself. The nation is seen as a cultural instrument that different communities built to evolve as a civilization. This element is inseparable from the constitution of the individual. Judging the individual without analyzing his culture doesn't make sense. The individual thrives only within the cultural context in which he is inserted. The individual needs the nation to develop its culture and identity. The nation needs the state to protect the individual from others. In this way, for the realist, who assumes that the individual needs the nation and the nation needs the state, it is seen as meaningless to create a legal instrument that seeks to prevent war. For them, it is the nation that needs to be defended. Thus, international law is an obstacle, since it limits the nation. Realists want to fix the problem of order. To preserve the order, it is important that the structures are not the new ones based on international law. They understand that the previous diplomatic structures that used to guarantee the stability of the European international system from 1815 to 1914 must be rescued. So how the European order was maintained stable for 100 years? It happened through 3 fundamental principles: anarchy, sovereignty, and balance of power. The international system is anarchic. This means that international law, as it is idealized in the League of Nations, has no place, since it creates instability. Thus, it must remain anarchic. Remember this: anarchy means that there is nothing above the states, nothing controls them. For states to remain autonomous, there must be sovereignty. There must be an institutional structure with all the necessary prerogatives to defend its survival, its culture, and its prosperity, including the prerogative to use violence. The international system is decentralized. There is nothing that regulates the relationship between forces. This is anarchy. In this way, each unit has full autonomy to develop the mechanisms of its prosperity and its culture. This is sovereignty. The balance of power is a regulatory mechanism. Whenever one force or a set of forces becomes so much greater than the others, there is a concrete threat that it can suppress its competitors. All the other forces in the system must come together to contain the expansion of that force. Now we will see three important authors that influenced realist theory: Machiavelli, Thucydides, and Hobbes. We will begin with Machiavelli. He focused on analyzing how basic human characteristics influence state security. The leader's main concern should be to promote national security, and for that it would be necessary to have power and the ability to conduct foreign policy. He wrote about power, balance of power, formation of alliances, causes of conflict. His primary focus was on national security. For him, survival of the state is crucial. The main responsibility of the rulers is always to defend the interests of the state and ensure its survival. Power and deception are two essential means for the conduct of foreign policy. If necessary, a ruler must be ruthless and deceptive while defending self-interest. In his famous work, The Prince, the author talks about how to gain, maintain, and expand power. Machiavelli understands that the world is a dangerous place and also full of opportunities. One should take necessary measures against dangers. If states want to enrich themselves, they should exploit opportunities. One should calculate rationally his interests and power against those of rival groups. Thucydides was a Greek historian, and he is considered as the founding father of realism. He focused on the competitions and conflicts between Greek city-states. He looked at politics and how it relates to moral issues, questioned how relations between states, in which power is crucial, can be guided through the norms of justice. In the history of the Peloponnesian War, he describes the armed conflict between Athenians and Spartans. Through this description, it is possible to observe realistic characteristics. He observed the nature of war and why it continually recurs. For him, the past was the guide for the future. His work is a study of the struggle for military and political power. He emphasizes the limited room for maneuver available to statesmen. So why did war occur between Athens and Sparta? For him, the reason was the fear associated with a shift in the balance of power. Although fear may lead to war, it is power and capabilities relative to others that determine the outcome. Sparta was afraid of losing its preeminent role in the Hellenic world, thus took countermeasures to build up its military strength. This is the balance of power mentality. When leaders perceive that balance of power is shifting to their disfavor, they try to change the situation due to suspicion, fear, distrust they feel for their rivals. The Peloponnesian War reshaped the ancient Greek world. Athens, the strongest city-state in Greece prior to the war's beginning, lost its power, while Sparta became the leading power of Greece. Hobbes' theories about the state of nature and the social contract are important for understanding how society is structured, what motivates actions, and their consequences from a political perspective. He had a pessimistic view of human nature. He emphasizes the necessity of having a powerful, centralized political authority. For him, human beings lived in a condition of war of everyone against everyone. He tried to show that in order to escape from this situation, he suggested placing all power to a sovereign state, or leviathan, a state authority or a supreme ruler, that would maintain order. Thus, it is clear that the Hobbesian state of nature is pessimistic, in which a perverse attitude is expected from the human being in the absence of an authority. Such selfish actions would lead to a state of war and mutual distrust. Therefore, a social contract that establishes order in society is essential, where conflicts of interest can be resolved in order to guarantee the safety of the population. Thank you for watching. Until next time.